and welcome to Series 4, Episode 8 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Laura North and my co-host is Leslie Cara.
Hello.
So on our last show,
I made you giggle
we
then,
spoke...
though.
Well, I should say we're having a little bit of technical issues today, aren't we? So I'm like a bit out of sync. So we're going to be interrupting each other constantly, I think, aren't we? So we're trying our best, guys. Okay. On our last show, we spoke to Sophie Hannah on how to be a literary powerhouse. I really loved that episode, and Sophie is a huge inspiration, a massive inspirational person. Her whole attitude and mindset, alongside the amazing book she produces, is just awe-inspiring. And in fact, it's something really connected with me when we were talking about with her, because she talked about how we phrase things in our mind and the thoughts that we have. And I've always thought of myself as being quite a confident person. So I've always thought I don't need to be a dream author. But actually, the way she phrased things, I was like, I still do think quite negatively about things. And I definitely think negatively about myself and my work. So I was like, this is like a light bulb moment. And I thought, well, I've actually got a bit more time on my hands with my children growing up. So I then went and signed up for her Dream Author course. So I'm really enjoying her podcast and I'm finding it very useful. So that's good.
Yeah, she is really inspirational, isn't she? Oh, I'm glad you've joined. I mean, I've thought of it several times. I've listened to some of her podcasts, and I just love her very common sense and way she talks about things. It just sort of kind of reinforces what you already know, but makes it something.
Yes. And in fact, it really helped me the other day. This is going completely off topic, guys. I had a bit of a to-do with my son brought some friends around for a play date, and they were quite naughty. And I had to then speak to the parents about how naughty they were. And that kind of thing always creates quite a lot of anxiety in me. I really don't like confrontation with the mums. But actually, I remembered Sophie's method of like thinking about things and managing them in yourself, and it really helped actually me cope quite well with that as well. So I feel like I'm all dream authory now.
Well done.
So yes, that was last week's episode, so do have a little listen if you haven't so far. So on to today's show, we have best-selling author and fan of the show, Emma Curtis, coming on to talk to us later. But for now, Leslie, how have you been the last few weeks? What have you been up to?
Well, do you know, I've been hunkering down. I think that's the best way I can describe it. I've just been writing and reading and pottering about, reorganizing my sock drawer, doing really boring things like that. No, I think I just needed this time to be quiet, and I hadn't arranged anything over this month. I mean, I'm glad now, what with all the sort of Omicron and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I've had my booster, I've had my third jab, so that's good. But so I haven't got the normal round of Christmas parties and get-togethers. That they're probably going to be fewer and far between anyway this year, aren't they? But I'd made the decision not to do anything like that this December because I really wanted just to focus on writing. And
how's your book coming along?
It's coming along very slowly, but it is coming along, and I've had a few little breakthroughs over the last few days, which I'll sort of I think we'll come on and talk about novels and how when they stall. That's what's kind of what we're going to talk about today, isn't it? A few little breakthroughs that have just enabled me to feel more confident about it. I mean, I always get to this stage, and I still feel very passionate about it. So it's all going well. What else have I been doing? I put a little, not a tree up. I put one of those sort of white twig bare branch tree things up. Because we're living in rented accommodation at the moment, and we have got room for a tree, but not room for our normal big tree. And half of the decorations are still in boxes that I can't get to. So I just thought I'll just buy something small and be done with it. And of course, we're not going to actually be here at Christmas. We're going away to spend Christmas with my brother. So,
Oh, lovely.
yeah,
That's nice not to have to host. It's good
yeah.
that you're having a bit of quiet time because you've had quite a stressful year, I think, haven't you? When you look back at the last 12 months, you've had so much going on in your personal life and your all three life as well,
I
haven't you?
have.
With moving and parents and things. So,
Yeah, yeah, I really need just, it's almost like going into hibernation, you know.
mm,
I just feel, I mean, I I have been out, you know, I mean, I have popped to the shops and things like that, and I've got to go to the opticians later because I managed to break my other pair of glasses. Well, not break them, the screws come out. So I'm going out, but only when I have to, you know.
yeah.
But I'm, you know, very fortunate that I can do that. Obviously, you know, not having children at home anymore, or a proper job to go to. Not that writing
Don't
isn't a
say
proper
that. You'll
job.
get us all,
No,
get
it
the
is a
trolls
proper
on
job.
us.
It's very much a proper job. I meant, you know, working outside the house. That's what I meant. Oh God, I don't want to be cancelled for saying
No,
that.
no, no. We all know what you meant. We all know.
But how about you, Lauren? What have you been up to?
Oh, well, actually, funnily enough, I was just reading through the notes that I made last week on what I was going to say, and it feels like I'm really calm and lovely. And I was like, yes, that's actually not what's happening now. So I've got just had so I finished my romance just after Nano and was like, brilliant, that's done. And then my edits for the first romance have just come through, and they are horrendous. They are the worst edits I have ever had. They are so hard. It's like it just feels like I'm having to rewrite a massive amount of this book, and I've got to do it over Christmas. So I'm quite stressed and feel a bit overwhelmed still. You know, when you just get those structural edits before you start, it always feels impossible. And I know that this afternoon I'm just going to go up to David Lloyd where I sit and write, and I'm just going to crack on for 3 hours, and I know I'll feel better once I've got to that stage. So yes, a
Yeah.
bit stressed, but okay.
You,
Yeah.
you will feel better once you've
Mm.
started it, because I mean, and you say they're the worst you've ever had, but they're probably not. I got a feeling that we think that every time.
Mm.
Getting edits is hard, isn't it?
Mm.
And I think once you've tackled a few of the points, maybe the easier ones first, and you feel that you're making some kind of headway, you'll feel much better about it.
Yes, I hope so. So we'll, yes, see how I'm doing in January when you next see me. So if I'm like,
Oh gosh, oh
but
dear.
that brings us quite nicely onto our topic for today, which is when to give up on a book. I don't know if that's going to be our snazzy title. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But that's pretty much it. So not to give up altogether and stop writing, but like when does a book just feel like so painful to write and you don't want to do it and you just know the idea isn't working? Like when do you make that decision and how does that come about? So it's a really tough one, isn't it? So have you ever had that, Leslie? Have you ever to give up on a book before?
I haven't actually given up on a book. I've always managed to go through, but I do always, and I had with this one as well a few weeks ago, reach the stage where you just kind of feel that you can't go on, or you feel that you've hit that wall. For me, I think that's always part of the process. I know it's quite common, isn't it, to sort of reach that 30K slump. And but yeah, I've always managed somehow to sort of persevere and just chip away, because I think if you with a lot of novels, I think that's what would be interesting to talk to Emma about. When do you decide when it's just a case of you've stalled and there's something
Mm.
not quite right and something, a problem to be solved that is doable, and when is it a complete no and you've got to give up? I've always felt that with all of my novels, even though I might have reached that stage where I felt really pressured and really worried and panicky almost that I can't finish them, I've always felt that passion for them is still there. It might have got buried a bit, but I still know how it's going to end, and I still can see how it could be good. And I just have to keep on little bit each day. I mean, you know, sometimes even if I just write a couple of paragraphs a day, it's keeping the idea alive even when you're in that stage, isn't it?
Mm.
And so, like, just literally just a few days ago and yesterday evening, I just had a little idea. It wasn't much, it was just something to insert in one of my little other author point of views, that weaves in through the novel. Just a sentence, and that seems to have made all the difference, because I can see, I can't say too much about it because it'd be a spoiler,
No.
but I can see a way now that I can get through it. But I am curious as to when, how would you know when something really, really isn't working? I mean, what do you think? Have you hit that problem before?
Well, sort of. Again, same as you, sort of. So I, with my first book, The Perfect Betrayal, I got to like 40,000 words, and I just knew it wasn't the book I wanted to write. Like I was almost there, but it wasn't quite right. So I 3 times it took me to rewrite that start. And so I did stop and start again completely when I just knew it wasn't quite the book I was trying to get to. So I had that, but then also I think more so with book 2, I wrote this book that both the editors, the US and the UK editor, had agreed with me. So they'd seen a massive plan for it. I'd done like a 5-page table of every scene that was going to happen. They all okayed it, and I started to write it. And I knew it wasn't right, and it was really hard to write, and it wasn't easy, and it just didn't feel like it was going where it needed to go. But because they'd approved it and I was very new to the relationships with the editors, I thought, oh, it's fine, I'll just, I'll deliver what they've asked for. And then when they both came back and was like, no, this isn't working at all, you need to stop, you need to like start again with a new book, I kind of was like, yeah, I should have known, and I should have listened to myself and have gone to them earlier. So I didn't give up. I should have done. So I ended up writing a whole book that was rubbish. So
yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to listen to that little voice. It's interesting though, isn't it, that if they'd approved the whole sort of plan and synopsis and everything, but there must have been just something, and
it didn't transfer to the story the right way. And I do understand that. And I think the book that I then wrote, One Step Behind, just was so much better and so exciting for me, and it was so easy to write, actually, that second one. So it goes to show that it was just completely the wrong story originally. So
yeah, and I think, nothing is ever wasted, is it? Because, they say that, isn't it? They say you need whatever 10,000 hours practice to become really good at something. I mean, you've had more than that, I'm sure.
God, how many hours do you reckon we've done of this?
God, I wouldn't like to calculate. I really wouldn't, over my lifetime anyway. It'd be a lot. But I think, yeah, you don't waste anything, because sometimes if you do have to, ditch something, and I have, when I say I haven't ditched a whole novel, I have ditched sections of novels. So maybe I've sort of was not quite, thinking about that, but I have ditched probably about 30 or 40,000 words, but I've sort of rewritten them, so I haven't ditched the idea or the novel.
No, it's the idea. It's getting rid of the idea, which I find quite gives me a bit of anxiety, just to get rid of something that you've grown yourself, to then be like, no, throwing it away. So I think that's the big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, that's different from saying, yeah, no, I'm just going to rewrite it, write it better. That's different. I mean, I think, it's happened to lots of authors, hasn't it? I was meant to sort of look up, but I didn't have time, actually. We've been so busy, haven't we, doing various things these last few days. But I'm sure there are some well-known authors that have given. I've got a vague memory that Claire Mackintosh ditched a novel once. Am I right?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
And you're right. I feel like there's quite a few big authors that have put on Twitter, I've had to do this. And it is a reminder, I think, that whatever level you're at, whatever stage, it does happen.
Yes,
So it's
yes, I'm sure it does. And I think, if you can recognise that when that's the right time, and then you probably feel it inside, you maybe feel relief at sort of putting it to one side and starting afresh. And as you said, with One Step Behind, it turned into a better novel, and so you were glad. Yeah. Well, we've got the right guest coming on today, certainly, to talk to us about this, because I think she's grappled with this very same problem, hasn't she?
Exactly, yes.
That is Emma Curtis. So welcome, Emma. Welcome, Emma Curtis, to In Suspense. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited about this.
I think, actually, you were one of our first ever listeners, weren't you?
Yes, I might well have been.
You might well have been our only listener at one point.
I just switched it on, and I just loved all the kind of chat at the beginning.
Yeah, we do a lot of
I like that. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well,
Real
thank you
people.
very much for coming on. Before we crack on with the questions, I'm going to read out your bio. Emma Curtis was born in Brighton and now lives in London with her husband. After raising her 2 children and working various jobs, her fascination with the darker side of domestic life inspired her to write her acclaimed debut novel, One Little Mistake. Since then, she has written 4 more novels. When I Find You was number 2, The Night You Left, number 3, and Keep Her Quiet, number 4, and the latest being Invite Me In, which Lauren and I both really enjoyed reading.
Yes.
Emma, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about Invite Me In?
Invite Me In, it's about a discontented wife, as so many of these things are, and she's a flawed personality. It's not all her husband's fault. It's not all her fault, but she's at the stage in her life where she's just beginning to despair and think her husband is controlling, but she has lovely children and a lovely lifestyle. It's just that something isn't there and she feels very trapped. And then into her life walks Dan, who is about the same age as her, and attractive and charming, and he begins to infiltrate the family with devastating consequences.
Yeah,
So it's about really, when you've been married for a long time and the grass is looking a little, you get a bit twitchy. but with the exacerbation of her alcoholism and her husband's controlling nature.
No, it's a fabulous novel. We
Very, very tense. And the book features a paraplegic character, which isn't something that you see that often in our genre of fiction. Can you tell us a little bit about where the character developed from and the research that you had to do for that?
Yeah, so it started a few years ago. I have a very good friend from university who had a spinal injury about 20 years ago in his late 30s. And I know him very well. And we were having a conversation about 4 books ago, right at the beginning. And he said, why don't you write I'd love you to write a paraplegic person. And if you do, don't make him the good guy. So we talked about it quite a lot. This was before all the kind of the business about only not writing other people's experience, the sensitivities around that. So it never really occurred to me that it was a tricky thing. But anyway, I got into it and thought about this story and then talked to him about it. And he was absolutely fine. And he was fine to give me any details I needed about life as a paraplegic. So between him and YouTube videos of young people explaining how they got in and out of bed or out of the pool or had babies or whatever it was, it just felt like it wasn't a difficult, it was quite a natural thing to write, partly because I know him so well and because he's such a positive personality who's made the best of his life and almost doesn't regret what happened. But it didn't feel like I had the Transworld towards the end were a little shaky, and we got a sensitivity reader, and that was a really good thing because there were some things that were so obvious when she said them, but it hadn't occurred to me at the time, and that David had missed. So between them, I felt pretty secure. I was still worried when it first came out that people might say, how can you write about a paraplegic when you don't have the experience? But no one has. Absolutely no one has come up with that. So it's almost as though, what I wanted and what David wanted was for you not to notice, really, there are scenes in which it's specific to the scene that he's in a wheelchair or to the events. But like with his life and his house, he lives as if he's not a paraplegic. He lives in a 2-story house. His life is pretty much uncurtailed, and that's what I wanted to be in the book. It's just a person. Yeah,
and I think you definitely achieved that because he's got such a dominant personality. Like when I think of him, that's what springs to mind as well. So it was really well done, I thought. So
I'm just spilling coffee on myself. You can't take me anywhere. Another stained top. Oh dear. No, it was really good. And I'm, what you said about having a sensitivity reader, and that was a positive experience. It was for me as well.
very
and
positive.
I had one with the Dare as well, because the character there suffered from epilepsy, and it was a very good experience. I know some people are a bit wary, aren't they, about sensitivity readers, but
Well, you are, especially I think our generation, who tend to think, why are people? So people are a lot more sensitive these days, and they have the power to tell you about it.
But you did a fantastic job. It's well worth a read. Really, really stunning novel. I mean, it's your book 5, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
That one. And so we were wondering, really, the classic question: where do your ideas come from? I wish we knew. But do you find it harder as you go along to come up with ideas, or are ideas easy for you?
The ideas make me panic because people are always saying, "Oh, I've got this great idea," and I do have friends who tell me things. I mean, like with David B, it's finding the idea. You can have a great idea, but it's finding the idea that's going to write a whole book for you. And quite often the best, most exciting, quirky premises, you sit down and try and actually work out how they would make a plot in a book, and they just don't. So you then get frustrated. But I think in some ways it's a matter of keeping it simple. And I never do. I think of these overcomplicated things. And then I had one in my head that was about 2 people who lived opposite each other and both had the big problems of horrible husband, whatever it is. I can't remember exactly what. But then halfway through, when they finally knocked on each other's doors, and there were different people behind the doors, you realise that these were on different time frames. And I banged away for about 2 months trying to work out how this would actually work. And in the end, I had to shelve it. But the idea was great, but,
That's really interesting.
That makes me want to curl up and hide under a desk when you suddenly add on the dimension of a different time frame. Yeah.
Somebody will probably write that now brilliantly.
It's just funny though, isn't it? When you think something's going to work and you get really excited about it. Yes. And then you realise that there's some glaring thing that you just haven't thought of. And it's
all that glaring. Why would anybody do that?
Yes.
That sort of thing. Why on earth would they do that? Why would they put up with that? Yeah.
Well, our topic for today is, in fact, when to give up on your book. So it's a case of how do we know when we're writing a book that it's just not working, and or when to battle on, because you do get to the 30,000 word mark and you do have that horrible feeling that you want to stop and you've got a new fresh idea. So that is that. And do you battle through it or do you bin it? And I think, Emma, I'm right in saying that you've had a little bit of recent experience with that topic, haven't you? So do you want to talk to us a little bit about your experience with when to give up?
Well, I think after doing the first 4 books, it was COVID and we were locked in, and I felt like doing something different. I think that was the problem. I kind of walked out of my zone. And actually, I loved the idea, and my agent loved the idea, and I wrote it, and I've really enjoyed it, and I liked the book. And then I gave it to one friend to read, and granted, he's in his 80s, and he's a literary author, and it's just not his thing. But his basic thing was he was quite brutal, actually, just wasn't thrilling. So I thought, so I gave it to my agent, and it wasn't thrilling, and I could have looked at it again and cut it and all that kind of thing. But because it was outside, it was more crimey than psychological suspense. So because it wasn't my normal genre, I just couldn't see the extra work being worthwhile. So it's something I might go back to. But I think if something isn't making your agent turn the pages. But there's also the thing about, when you're an unpublished author and you're writing and you're submitting and you're getting things back and you're rewriting it and you're going, there are the people who have the one book, the precious book, and they will change it and bang on and resubmit it, for a couple of decades, or they just will not let it go. And there are people who will get their rejections back and think, sod it, start again, new idea. And I tend to be more in that camp. So I have thrown away several. In fact, since I've published, I think I've dumped 3 entire books.
Wow.
Which is quite a lot. And then before I wrote the one started on the one I'm writing now, I wrote 40,000 words of something, killed somebody when I hadn't expected to kill them because it was a really traumatic moment. And then I got so stewed up in how on earth he was going to get rid of the body and all that. And then I couldn't work out, well, I've killed them, so what now? So I tried to unkill them. But by that time, I don't know what it was. I think I had a bit of a 7-year itch. I was just feeling so burnt out and so sort of fed up with the whole thing and tired that I shelved it. So that's 40,000 words. And now I wrote a full proposal, sent to my agent. That's when I've written about 35,000 words of another one, which I think I kind of know what happens all the way through. It's got momentum and I like the subject and it's interesting. Sometimes I think I'm a little bit fickle. I can go off a book very quickly and it's all, if somebody doesn't like it, I then totally lose confidence in it. So, I mean, you very kindly read about 30,000 words of this one for me, Laurie. And that was really for me to give somebody something before it's actually finished. I never do that because I know what happens if they say something negative. I just go off it. But fortunately, I didn't. You made some fantastic points.
I just loved it as well. I thought it's a really fascinating idea. So I won't say anything about it, but I think it's definitely one with big legs.
Well, you agree. It was the right sort of criticism. It wasn't like my octogenarian friend who just demolished me. It was constructive and made me want to, actually quite exciting because it gave me other options.
But then I think that goes with the thing that you need to think about who your feedback's coming from, doesn't it? Like, is it someone who's in the same genre as you and someone who's doing the same thing as you? Is it someone who's got the experience of the industry? So it's hard
just understands.
Yeah, it's hard to know, isn't it?
Yeah, I won't give it to him again.
That's interesting what you said about you'd never given your work at such an early stage to someone else to read before, and that you said that if you'd heard anything negative that might affect, because I usually give my work to my editor in an early stage. I usually give her the first 30 or 40,000 words, and her comments at that stage really help me because she might be saying something like, oh, is this going to happen? Or is this going to happen? And if she's guessed what's going to happen, I think, oh, okay, so I've done something, I need to rein back a bit here. Or one of her suggestions might make me think, oh, that's a good idea.
So that's my idea.
That normally kind of helps me. And also it tends to coincide with the time where I'm struggling anyway, so I can do with some input. But I've always wanted to give the novel to her when it's completed so she can read it from start to finish, but it's never quite worked out like that. But you've kind of answered the question I was going to ask, which was, have you ever felt like this before? So you've kind of
too often. But what you say is, I might seriously consider giving it to my new editor at the same stage. I'll give it to my agent at the end of this week. Just because I can't afford to get to the end and have wasted the time again.
I suppose, how do we know? Sorry, I've dropped my notes now. How do we know when something is just the tricky middle and we've reached that wall, and when it's time to give up? I think that's the sort of $1 million question, isn't it?
I don't know why. I'm so sensitive to flogging a dead horse. So that is. And I say it with other people I know who aren't published but have the same novel, and I just want to say to them, you've been working on that for 5 years, put it down, start something fresh. And I can very quickly turn against something I'm writing, and I don't know why I'm probably oversensitive. The love just falls away. I've written so many words that will never see the light of day, and I keep thinking, well, I'll go back to that book a couple of books and just see whether it was that bad or any good. But I never do. They just get shelved under experience. But with the baggy middle, I don't tend to find that really. I find that the chapters go very quickly when I'm writing. It's more to do with me when it gets to the end. Unfortunately, when I've written far too much, then it does it. I think if you're trying to write to get published, being baggy in the book anyway, it doesn't matter, just have a shorter book, but just don't. I mean, if it seems to start sinking, you have to. You're supposed to shoot somebody in the head or something, aren't you? Kill some. I think that's what happened with the book, where the person was suddenly dead who shouldn't have been dead. You have to keep the reader on their toes, and not with psychological suspense. There is no time really for any moment of boredom or too long dialogue. You have to just crack along.
Yeah, although I keep getting the same feedback on my structural edits for my psychological suspense, which is, can we have a little bit more time where the characters breathe and just take a moment to let the reader catch up a bit? So I think I've gone a bit extreme. I'm like, this has got to end with a really exciting bit, and then there's got to be something else. So I think it's that balance, isn't it, of allowing the reader to sort of have a bit of downtime as well, not to be all too intense.
Yes, I think there are some books where there is no downtime at all, and I quite like reading those. Like The Woman in the Window is like that. It's just bam, bam. There's a cliffhanger every 3 pages or something. That's amazing. And there are ones. I think you have to be such a skilled writer for the downtime bits, and you can feed them in. Some people have a real natural feel for description and for the sort of minutiae of life. They make it feel interesting part of the book, rather than a kind of, I don't know that I'm any good at that or not.
I suppose in the downtime, if you're giving your characters a chance to breathe, but you can slip in some very important information that that reader, like a little clue or something. So that if the downtime serves, it's got to be downtime, but it's got to serve some purpose. It can't just.
What am I saying here? And does this move the plot along at all?
Make this scene work harder. That's what we get, isn't it? Constantly.
Well, I get dramatise this scene as I've kind of scooted over some bit. Can you please dramatise this, stop and slow down?
Do you want to ask your question, Leslie, about planning? Because I think we've moved on.
Yes, because we've kind of covered, Emma's so good at doing this that she's just answered all our questions before we've even asked them. So you're good. That's brilliant. Really interesting. My next question was, it's to do with planning, really. Do you think something like this, giving up on a novel, is more likely to happen if you're somebody who doesn't plan out your novels in detail beforehand? Now, I don't know what your approach to planning is, so you'll probably tell us in a minute. But I do wonder sometimes if writers who work things out very meticulously in advance and who have a really, really detailed chapter by chapter outline, whether it's less likely to happen. Although I think it did happen with you, didn't it, Lauren? You had a meticulous outline.
Yes, exactly. I did, yes. But yes, never mind.
What do you think? What do you think about that, Emma? Do you think?
I think there are rare writers who plan that deeply. You can do a proposal, which is it's better than a chapter plan. I personally think it's an impossible thing. Because why should you tie yourself into a chapter by chapter? There's too much detail for the editor, which sets up their expectations of this is going to happen, then that is going to happen. It doesn't leave room. So a proposal leaves you room, but you're also in danger of not having enough. And I'll do a paragraph, which when I'm writing it is a chapter, and I look at it, actually, nothing really happens in that, although it does, but there's not enough meat to it. So you have to have a kind of, it's a mixture of pantsing and planning, isn't it? You give yourself certain things that are going to happen so that you have the security of knowing particularly why the thing happened, because what you don't want is a completely unbelievable, contrived ending that's just going to make the reader fed up. Or that thing of, sometimes you read a book and you think, why on earth is that, why is that woman putting up with this? Why don't they just tell each other? Why don't they just ask the question? So you have to be believable. in terms of human life. So pantsing, I hate that word, but just flying by the seat of your pants actually in some ways is a good thing, because you have the excitement there, but just give yourself somewhere to land in your flying every so often. And it's just a layout really, but don't tie yourself into anything.
So you have like a few key plot points that you know are going to happen, and then when you come and sit down at your desk, you just go where it takes you.
Yes, and sometimes annoyingly it will take you. Well, it's while you're it's the devil in the detail thing. While you're writing it, you think, oh, and you rewrite. And I've had one. The proposal for the one I'm doing now that I sent my agent had somebody who didn't die, but now they have died, so that just changes kind of the whole thing. But I just realised there wasn't enough at stake.
Yeah,
they didn't die. So it's a continually changing landscape with certain things in it. Like I know exactly why what happened.
Yeah,
it's just how you get to that point.
Yes,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Learning how different writers write.
Yeah,
and work on it. DX is quite different from how I write. I'm quite a planner, and actually with my next book I'm planning to be even more planny and do actually what you've just cautioned against, Emma, which is try and do a much more detailed chapter plan, just to see how that works for me slightly differently, I think. So just trying different methods as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, people like James Patterson, I know he's kind of a writing factory and has all writers writing for him, but I think he and the writers he works with, they really do an incredibly detailed chapter by chapter plan and know exactly what's going to happen in each chapter, and all the effort, and I know other writers work like this as well, their main effort is on the planning, and they can spend months on that planning, and then the actual writing can take them as little as a month or 6 weeks.
Yeah,
that's how it should. I mean, that's the kind of dream, isn't it?
Isn't it?
But I don't think I could do that. I'm always too impatient to start writing. Your ideas part of your head starts filling up and conversations are in there, and you want to get them while they're fresh.
Yeah, that's very true. I agree with that as well, actually. You do want to jump forward a bit, don't you?
Yeah, but I can see, I mean, if you were very busy, you're a young mum, you were very busy. I'm here, I've got plenty of time, my kids have left home, so I've got a bit more time, whereas I think you probably have to be a lot more efficient about your time management in order to get your work done. So I think maybe the detailed planning will help there.
Yeah, I think it's also just how your brain works as well, doesn't it? How you feel most comfortable working.
Yeah, that is a good point, because you and I are probably in a similar situation in that respect. You know, we can work when we want, can't we? We haven't got not other people's sort of beck and call so much. So that does, because I know you're always sort of ferrying your children here, there, and everywhere, aren't you?
Yeah, my laptop normally comes with me.
But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yes. So what advice, Emma, would you give to anybody listening who is at that stage in a book where they're struggling with it a bit and they're not sure whether to give up or not? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, the simplest thing to do is read it in a different format. Either get it read aloud to you on the read aloud button that I've discovered recently. That's a really good way while you're doing the housework. But I mean, do that, or put it onto your iPhone and read it, because it feels completely different once it's off your screen. But I'll leave it a couple of weeks before that. If you feel that's like heart pumping excitement, or your aching diaphragm as you feel suspense at your own words that you know and you know what's going to happen, then anybody reading it fresh is going to feel it too. So if you're still surprising yourself, that's a good thing. If you've read it fresh, I don't know. It depends. Sometimes it's people get fed up and it's just an excuse to give up.
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? Especially if perhaps
if you come at the story because this is your first book. Normally you're not in the publishing world. You haven't done it 5 times before. The story may mean a lot more to you. There might be autobiographical that word.
Yeah.
Autobiographical elements to it. So, there's more, the passion is there. It's different once you've got a contract and you've got to get your book in a year. So I would just read it fresh and give it a chance. But if you've sent it out to a couple of dozen agents and got the negative for that, I would then put it aside and start afresh.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice.
But I mean, some people wouldn't see it like that.
That is good advice, to read it, to send it to, or to send it to yourself on your Kindle and read it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you said about the voice record, the reading.
Read aloud.
Yeah.
I tried that, but then it's kind of quite a boring voice that reads it out, isn't it? They don't sort of put the right inflections.
Oh yeah, no, they don't. But you get used to it. And if you take your computer down to the kitchen, I wait till my husband's out, take it downstairs, and then I spring clean the kitchen top to toe for about then 4 or 5 hours. Then I move it closer to the bathroom. So if you're doing something else, you're not focusing on the sort of bad. I've got a woman named Fee in the one I'm doing now, and you keep saying Fi. So if you're not focusing on that, you do kind of tune into the story a bit more. And also you hear if it gets dull or if there are mistakes, you do pick them up. So I find it really useful, actually, and yeah.
Interesting.
It's interesting.
Yes. Is it my?
It's your go, yeah. Because we skipped ahead again.
Yes, so we've done that, haven't we? Yes. Well, oh gosh, we're on to that bit already. We're asking what our guests have been reading lately. Emma, what have you been reading lately, or what can you recommend on your?
Well, my book, I think I was looking at the books I've read this year, but the first, when I read that question, the first book I thought of was this isn't the right cover because this is the proof cover, but it's Sam Lloyd's The Rising Tide.
Oh.
And he's a trans world author. He wrote a book called The Memory Wood.
Oh, yes.
Years ago, which was fantastic. So I was really, really pleased to get sent this. And it is from the moment this woman realizes that her husband has gone out to sea in their boat with their children and the boat's been found empty. It just, I mean, this is a book that isn't a moment to breathe in it. But he writes so beautifully and so descriptively that it's just the most incredible reading experience. And I just feel that, with books like that, I can really learn from them as well as enjoying them. He's a very special writer, Sam Lloyd, and highly recommend that. But I've been rereading, and all through COVID, actually, I reread all the big books that came out, The Girl Before and The Girl on the Train and Gone Girl, all the ones over the years, the sort of real standout, to see whether they stood the test of time. And I have to say most of them did. I loved rereading Girl on the Train and Gone Girl. And I love J.P. Delaney's books.
Yes, very clever writer. Yeah.
I think the latest one I've read is about switched children in the hospital, babies born and switched.
Oh.
Now, was it J.P. Delaney that wrote The Girl Before?
Yes, yeah,
and
I love that one.
That's going to be on TV, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. No, he's very good. But yes, when my other book I loved was the latest Robert Galbraith book. Blood, I can't remember what it's called now, but I love all of those.
Oh yes.
And Celia Walden's Payday was fantastic. There are a lot. I try and read. When I was on holiday last week, I went to the airport and bought a Jodi Picoult book.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to get away from psychological suspense on holiday. And I very rarely read them, but because I very rarely go on holiday, but she is a fantastic plotter and a really good writer, really interesting writer. There's just so much out there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Not enough time to read.
Not enough. And Lisa Jewell's Invisible Girl. Well, this also.
Oh yes. Oh, I loved that one.
Yes.
Yes.
Loved that.
Yeah.
Oh, you can always rely on a Lisa Jewell, can't you?
Oh yes.
You can.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You can. Picking them up. You can rely on Lisa Jewell. She's very. I've been reading her since Ralph's Party back in the 90s.
Oh yeah, me too.
Me too. Yeah.
She was one that made me want to write. Lisa Joel.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Friend.
I can see that.
And what about
what
you,
have
Lauren? Oh.
Yes, well, I read, I went off genre and read Love Impossible, which was one of the really big, it's going to be big next year. It's an amazing book. Can't remember who wrote it or anything. I'll put something on the screen. And I loved that. And that was really refreshing as well to read something a bit different. And I'm just listening to Her Last Holiday, if you can see that, by C.L. Taylor. Which I'm really enjoying. It's been a while since I've listened to a psychological suspense as an audiobook, so I'm really enjoying it as well. What about you, Leslie?
I'm looking forward to reading C.L. Taylor's as well. I've been reading Linwood Barclay's Take Your Breath Away.
Oh yes, I just got a copy of that.
And it is really good. I mean, I'm loving that. It's a real page turner, as are all of his, to be honest.
Yes,
but
it's very good.
It's great. And I've also been very lucky. I've been sent an early proof of Fiona Barton's novel, book number 4, which is called Local Gone Missing.
Oh, has it got the same journalist in it?
No, it's a standalone. It hasn't got Kate Waters in it, and I'm really enjoying it. So those are the two that I'm actually reading them at the same time. I don't usually do that, but they're so different that I find I can read one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So gosh, lots of books to recommend.
Yeah. And we're on to our fun question now, Emma. So because we've been talking about when to give up on a book, we thought our fun question would be, have you ever given up on something you wish you hadn't, or perhaps wish you had given up on?
This is really difficult. I thought so hard. I don't tend to give up on things. So I couldn't think of a specific thing, but the kind of regret I have in my life is after leaving university, I suppose I gave up on the sort of the idea of a career. I just kind of faffed around for a while with temping jobs, and I tried an antique market thing with a friend, and I didn't go for, I've just seen my daughter and my son doing this and taking off in proper careers, things they want to do. And then I got married quite young and had children and school secretary, and then I started writing, which ultimately I think saved me. But I think I gave up on myself a bit back then. I didn't think any of it was for me. It didn't occur to me that I could work in publishing or do anything. It just didn't. I don't know why. Just didn't factor in. It was something other people did. So I did daft jobs really for ages. So yeah, I think that it's only in the last 5 years or so, as my children have grown up, that I've thought, why didn't I watched them. My daughter really wanted to work in charities, and now she's doing it. My son wanted to work for the government, is doing that. Why didn't I kind of want to work in a specific area and knock on the doors until they open? So that's my kind of giving up regret. But apart from that, there was a toxic friendship I gave up on.
Hey.
That was one thing. That was excruciating. But yes, I did that. I had to say it.
Yeah. What about you, Leslie?
I was just thinking about what you just said just then about the career and everything, and I was thinking actually before I talk about mine how common that is, I think, with writers to have a variety of different jobs and go from one thing to another. And maybe that's because ultimately you were destined for this career that you've got now, Emma.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Late coming, but it's there now.
Yeah. How about me? What have I given up on? I mean, so many things, really. I remember the funniest one was when I gave up on jogging or running, because I was in my early 20s and I decided I was going to start jogging every day to keep fit. And I bought myself, as usual with me, I bought myself a nice tracksuit, got all the gear. And my sister, who's 9 years older than me, she sort of said, oh, well, how long are you going to keep this jogging up? You bought yourself a very expensive tracksuit there, Leslie. How long are you going to keep this jogging up? And I said, well, forever, for life, obviously. I think I lasted a week, It wasn't for me. I was joking with Lauren earlier, there was probably my first marriage I should have given up on quite a bit sooner than I did. But you struggle on, don't you? And friendships, I have actually culled a friendship that wasn't doing me any good. I'd forgotten about that.
Good for
That's
you.
the hardest. It's very, very difficult thing.
But it's the healthiest thing you can do, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone makes you feel bad about yourself, they're not a friend, are they? No. What about you, Lauren? What have you ever given up?
Well, I have the story of sort of being sort of strong-armed by the head teacher to go to this PTA meeting because PTA had like collapsed, and I was like, the kids were quite really young. I think my kids were at the very start of primary school at that point. And it was just, can you just come along, just be another bum in the seat kind of thing. I was like, yeah, fine, but I'm not getting involved. And then I think within 4 weeks, I was the chair of the PTA, and then spent a good 3 or 4 years then running a Christmas fair, which is probably one of the most stressful things I've ever done in my life. And the organisation for starts in July. And I wish I hadn't gone to that meeting. But I then did give up eventually. I gave up being chair of the PTA a few years ago, but then got back on it because they then collapsed again. And then I just said to the head teacher, I know it's going to collapse, but I've got to stop this now. And then I have stopped, and it has collapsed, but you can't always
your problem
now. So
I can think of nothing worse than being
it's quite
chair of a PCA.
I think
I never agree to a committee.
And it's always that thing, like, just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should do something. And I think that's a lesson I have to keep telling myself, just because I could volunteer for this and I would be good at doing this, but you don't necessarily have to do it, and it doesn't mean you should do it. So I constantly, and my husband to like, don't volunteer for anything. I'm like a real volunteerer. Yes, that's my lesson.
Yeah, I think committees, I've done a committee that I got out of it after 5 years, and I would never, anybody asked me to go on a committee.
No.
Well, I'm on the Frinton Literary Festival committee, even though I don't live there anymore. I'm still staying on the committee, but that's a nice committee.
Nice.
That's a nice one. Yeah,
we don't fall out or anything, no, so that's okay. Well, sadly, Emma, that's all we've got time for today, but we've really loved having you on.
I've enjoyed it so much. Seeing you too is just lovely. Anyway.
As our first listener, we should have had you on much sooner, but it's so lovely to have you on.
But I had to
now.
listen to them to know what the form was. It's been really nice. It's just nice talking to
and
people.
Of course, this was supposed to be our very last episode before Christmas, but we've kind of changed things, haven't we, Lauren? Because we have got a Christmas special, and is that coming out next week?
Yes, we've got like back-to-back weeks. So this episode will be aired on Thursday, the 16th of December, and then the following week we're speaking to Bay Tales, the two Bay Tales people, Simon Buick and Vic Watson. Yes, so we certainly are, and we're going to be talking about the importance of events for authors, both virtual and real. That's a good episode. We'll find our Christmas jumpers, won't we, or hats and whatnot.
Yes, no, I'm really, really looking forward to that one. So that just leaves me to say it's goodbye from Emma.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from them.